I know this sounds weird, and I haven't told anyone. Literally, not my mum or my little sister, or even my friends. But it's true. And recording this seems like the only way somebody might believe me. I need someone to believe me, because I've done something really awful. I realized I had this thing when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I remember it very clearly. I was watching cartoons on a Saturday morning, super tired, resting my head on my right hand. Then I noticed a little bump on my skin. It's right near my right temple, but a little further back, kind of in the hairline. The bump wasn't anything unusual. It felt like a pimple or some dry skin or something. So I remember, while the cartoon characters were jumping around, solving some colourful mystery, I started to pick at it. The skin flaked away normally, leaving behind a little wet spot. A tiny bit of blood or pus or something, I thought. But I kept poking at it with my little finger, and I remember it feeling kinda good. I don't want this to sound creepy or anything. I mean, it is creepy, but it didn't feel like weird good. It just sort of felt relaxing, like a deep massage. And so, half paying attention, I kept prodding at it, making little circles with the tip of my finger against this tiny wet spot. I thought it was just spreading the cool wet whatever, but after a bit, I realized I was actually making the hole bigger. It was then that I panicked. I looked at my finger and saw a thin layer of transparent liquid, but watched it evaporate before my eyes in a matter of seconds. I got up and ran in my Ninja Turtle PJs out of our living room, up the stairs, and into the washroom, where I peered at the side of my face in the mirror. Just a tiny red spot, hidden in my dark brown hair. I pulled and stretched at my skin for a bit, trying to figure out what I'd just found. Maybe it was something that happened to kids at a certain age. The older kids always talked about weird stuff that I didn't get. This was probably something like that. What also was obvious to me at that age was that the older kids never talked about these things around adults. And so I washed my hands and my face and went back to my cartoons. It wasn't until a few months later that I discovered the other part of it. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I would lightly touch that little red spot near my temple, swirl my finger around, and relax. One night, my mum was in a screaming match with my stepdad downstairs, and I was desperately trying to go to sleep. I hated hearing my mum like that, so angry and scared. And my stepdad, always pounding his fist against the walls or tables, to make sure she got the terrible point he was trying to make. Sometimes, my mum would give me these tiny translucent yellow pills to help me sleep when I was sick. I loved the way they looked with the light shining through them, but there were none to be had that night. I only had what I knew helped me relax. I ran the pads of my fingers against my temple, slowly but with more frantic pressure than usual. I felt the wetness spread, but it wasn't helping. Something glass shattered downstairs. I heard a crack. But not from downstairs. In the side of my head. That thin feeling spot on my skull had released against the pressure with a sound like an eggshell. I froze, expecting a wave of pain, but nothing came. I thought about calling for my mum, but my stepdad would be furious if he knew I was still awake. And what if whatever was happening was super embarrassing? There's something weird about feeling good. There's a level of shame to it, especially at that age where you don't understand anything yet. So I stayed quiet. My fingertips felt around the defined cracks, felt the fragments of bone retract from my touch towards what? Was my brain barely an inch away? That couldn't be right. Whatever was there, exploring it sent shivers across my scalp. I pressed one digit further, past my skull. It's really hard to describe the feeling inside my head, past my skull, inside the hole. It feels the same now as it did then. It's kind of like the warm, wet fog that belches out from a humidifier if you hold your hand close. But it also has a sort of resistance to it, like moving your hand through water. It's slowed down. So, one curious finger of my 8-year-old self pried in and felt that fog, that liquid, that space, until it came upon something different. A solid form, incredibly small. I clawed my finger around that something and pulled it out, feeling the cracked bones close in on my retreating finger and seal themselves back together. And in my hand was a little translucent sleeping pill. I have to keep pressing that I was young. Some part of me thought this was a dream, and after my finger and the pill had dried only a few moments later, I popped the pill and went to sleep. The things I want have to be able to fit. At first it was coins, candles, marbles. But as the years went on, I started putting my finger and thumb into the hole. 2 fingers, 3. I was pulling out cigarettes, $20 bills, watches. The more complicated the object, the more I have to dig and search around. As I started getting on the internet and sitting through sex ed classes, I understood that this was far from what the schoolyard bullies were talking about. This was something unusual, maybe even unnatural, but it didn't hurt. In fact, it felt really good most of the time, and it wasn't causing any harm to my body or my life or anyone else's. So I continued to keep it my little secret. I have no idea how someone would react. They'd probably think I was a fucking freak. I often think that, but there's no doubt that it's useful. Once, my sister lost her favourite necklace, and all it took was a moment of privacy for me, and I could give it back to her. Mum was having issues making rent this month, and suddenly I had some extra cash from my part-time job. I forgot my USB stick at home with my homework on it. Hide in a stall for a few minutes, and I'm ready for the presentation. This one, I should have taken notice, as when I got home from school that day, my USB stick wasn't on my bedside table. Obviously. It was in my backpack. I had it. I should have given that more than a passing thought. It was 3 months ago when my stepdad accused me of stealing from his wallet. Of course, I didn't mean to, but I assume now that I had, just without knowing it. But what I knew then and know now is irrelevant. He was pissed. He threw me against the wall, smashing a couple photos with my body. Mum and my sister were out at a play date, so there was no one on my side. His foot swung hard into my gut as he bellowed, droplets of whiskey-scented saliva spraying on me, and another ruthless kick. I tried to yell back. I tried to get away, but every time I got to my feet, he'd throw me back down. This was his house, and his moment. My heart was thudding in my chest. I could see the veins in his own temple throbbing with adrenaline and rage. He slammed my head against the floor. I lost consciousness, only for a second. I felt like he could very well kill me in this moment, and so, in a daze, I lifted my hand up to the side of my face and felt that little red spot near my temple. I'm sure it just seemed to him like I was shielding myself from his blows, at first. And so he continued to scream and rain down blows on my aching, bleeding body. But once I felt that shiver spread across my scalp, and I dug the fingers past those complacent shards of bone, he went dead silent. Stop. Something to make him stop. That was all that was going through my pain-addled mind. I heard him, right beside me, but so far away, cursing and stumbling backward. I couldn't feel anything, aside from the wispy, flowing fog. So I pushed further. My entire hand slid roughly into the hole, cracking more bones than I'd felt before. I didn't care. If this was going to kill me, I thought I was going to die either way. I heard my stepdad retch in disgust and horror. My hand grasped and grabbed at the worm inside. My eyes rolled and flexed backwards into my skull with the effort. I think I vomited too. But I still couldn't find anything. He was screaming now. Not in anger, but in terror and concern. I don't think he formed words, though. Just noise. Just something to make him stop. My wrist, my forearm, almost up to my elbow, was fully submerged in my skull, a place that physically could not fit that lymph that was moving and searching within it. And then I touched something. It was wet, like all the things were when I first found them. But this was different. It felt thicker. I ran my hand along this object, felt it move on its own. Distantly, my stepdad gasped and went silent once more. What was this? I wrapped my fingers around it, though not quite fully around it due to its size, but enough to have a firm grasp. It shook in my palm even faster. He screamed once. I pulled it from my head with a slosh. This mass of red and purple and yellow and black. It spat blood onto my shirt and the floor with one convulsion, then became dead meat. It was a heart. It was his heart. I ran away that day to avoid whatever punishment might come to me. Took the heart and threw it in the bushland to hopefully be picked away by scavengers. But the police and doctors didn't know how to explain what happened to my stepdad. There will be lots of questions if I go back, but I might be able to see my mum and sister again. I could play dumb and act like I have no idea what happened. I was just scared and ran. Maybe we could go back to normal, pretend that things are normal. But I'm not. I never was. And I think I might be able to live with that. There's no doubt that it's useful. Hello, sinister listeners. If you've enjoyed this story, then you'll find all the author's information in the description below. For more content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to succumb to the sinister.